Using the HPT model in educational technology to improve airport staff development, a theoretical case study. A multimedia presentation based on original research conducted by Instructional Design and Technology student Robert C. Ranstadler. This presentation fulfills the end-of-course requirements for EDUC 732, Principles of Human Performance Technology, taught by Dr. Daniel Baer, School of Education, Liberty University. June 13th, 2025. The author has no known conflicts of interest to disclose. Correspondence concerning this presentation or the research paper upon which it is based should be addressed to Robert C. Ranstadler at rranstadler@liberty.edu. Training and education aimed at maximizing human performance, mitigating risk, and upholding safety are central to aviation. Every aviation professional, from pilots to ramp agents, must constantly develop new skills while remaining efficacious and vigilant. The economic and social repercussions wrought by COVID-19 restrictions, however, continue to pose many challenges, particularly when recruiting, retaining, and training key personnel. The fictional airport at the center of this study, which is based on a real airport that I managed for more than a year, is one of many across the world affected by these developments. Human Performance Technology, or HPT, and Educational Technology, or EdTech, may offer a remedy to the airport staffing and performance challenges. Leveraging a version of Rosenberg's HPT process model to design, develop, and implement interventions, including the adoption of a digital training program in a hybrid learning environment, is the focus of my research. I acknowledge that the scope and breadth of this assignment precluded a more substantial explanation of the working environment discussed herein. Moreover, my literature review is limited with only a small portion of the available corpus of contemporary work studied. If this were a practical case study rather than a theoretical proposal, I would have relied more on empirical observations, quantitative analysis, and a broader range of data than discussed herein. Some human performance scholars consider HPT a conceptual framework, while others see it as a form of systems thinking. Marilyn Gilbert even referred to it as a quote-unquote topsy-turvy philosophy aimed at maximizing performance to achieve worthy accomplishments, but lacking concrete structure or a disciplinary pedigree. Regardless of opinion, it's clear that HPT is a systematic and systemic approach to learning and development with the capacity to improve performance. Although HPT practitioners use a variety of techniques to accomplish their goals, the method central to this study is an adapted version of Rosenberg's HPT process model. This framework is a multi-step approach consisting of 3 iterative phases, including performance analysis, cause analysis, and intervention, selection, and design. As is the case with HPT, a full accounting of the history and development of the instruction design process exceeds the scope of this paper. Suffice to say, HPT and ID are 2 closely related fields that in practice share more similarities than differences. In the broadest sense, they are both focused on achieving desired human outcomes. Instructional designers are generally concerned with addressing learning shortfalls, whereas HPT professionals analyze environmental and individual performance gaps. Yet, both frameworks share an iterative approach to solving problems by incorporating analyses, design, development, implementation, and evaluation steps in their work. University of Illinois Professor of Education Sarat Kurt defines educational technology as, quote, a field of study that investigates the process of analyzing, designing, developing, implementing, and evaluating the instructional environment and learning materials in order to improve teaching and learning, unquote. In this sense, the EdTech methodology is similar to the HPT and ID frameworks and methods discussed on the preceding slides. This connection is important to consider because educational technology, sometimes referred to as instructional technology, is a field or framework much greater than the sum of its parts. It is only through the thoughtful and meaningful implementation of EdTech that change agents can facilitate learning and enact organizational improvements. Evaluating the number and type of digital tools used in learning is no more or less critical than considering the human factors and organizational obstacles affecting their selection and use. Online learning has likewise grown in scope and relevance over the past several years, especially following its explosive growth on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic. Once just an alternative means of delivering higher education, online learning has exploded into a multi-billion-dollar industry that provides meaningful learning solutions in a variety of environments. Today's online learners include everyone from K through 12 students, the military, and corporate employees, the latter whom increasingly rely on online learning to meet training and upskilling requirements in rapidly evolving technological environments. As is the situation with this case study, much of this learning is accomplished in the workplace while using online or digital tools. Up until this point, I relied on the work of several scholars to support some general and anecdotal observations about the current state of airport staff development, including the theoretical and practical applications of instructional technology, HPT, and ID. The literature review, on the other hand, provides a brief overview of ideas, studies, and findings directly applicable to my proposal. It includes abbreviated reviews and comparisons of 6 scholarly articles specifically concerned with the implementation of instructional design and educational technology in the workplace viewed through the lens of contemporary HPT practices. The first article, from Atiku et al., provides a closer look at learning and development challenges plaguing today's airports. The next pair of articles, by Giacomo and Bremen and Morales, examine the emerging and evolving roles of instructional design and course design in the modern workspace. Finally, the last 3 articles, from Huang and Klein, Kalipiowski et al., and Powers and Moore, deliver insights into the steps behind implementing 3 specific types of digital tools in learning environments. In their 2025 article addressing learning and development issues in airport companies, Itiku et al. Reinforced the point I made during the introduction that aviation industry thrives on safety management and operational efficiency, administered and carried out by a highly skilled and constantly developing workforce. The group posits that airport L&D leaders can sculpt a more effective workforce by focusing on the 3 areas of intervention, including cultural diversities, technological proficiencies, and safety security checks. 3 obstacles, however, stand in the path of workforce development, including a lack of occupational specialization, unstable leadership or management turnover, and an absence of needs assessments. All 3 factors are applicable to the fictional staff featured at the heart of this proposal. Atiku et al. Conclude that the most viable way of solving most of these problems is through the integration of organizational development specialists with the airport's full-time management staff. In Trends and Implications of Models, Frameworks, and Approaches Used by Instructional Designers in Workplace Learning and Performance Improvement, researchers Giacomo and Bremen examine ID model and framework trends in performance development. Their survey study revealed that the top 3 most used ID and HPT models are ADDIE, Performance Gap Analysis, and Kirkpatrick's Evaluation Model. Despite the widespread adoption and use of ID and HPT practices in some industries, such as the education, health, financial, and IT sectors, the pair surmises that gaps in existing research and literature are stifling the use of common models elsewhere. In his 2009 article, Constructivist Instructional Design, A Blueprint for Online Course Design, Morales likewise highlights how disconnects between ID research and practice are posing limits on its wider use. Morales observes that many ID professionals neglect the fundamental aspects of learning because they are consumed with the technological dimensions of the design process. He suggests, however, that using a more intentional approach based on constructivism learning theory can offset these deficits. I incorporated several of his ideas regarding intentionality in the design process in my theoretical proposal. The remaining 3 articles, by Huang and Klein, Kalipiowski et al., and Powers and Moore, respectively examine the steps behind selecting and implementing mobile performance support systems, or MPSS, digital badges, and learning management systems, or LMS, in various learning environments. Huang and Klein posit that wearable support devices enhance worker performance in learning when integrated with HPT interventions. Kalipiowski et al. Find that digital badging and gamification, while increasingly popular in the design community, must be fully embraced and assigned organizational value in order to maximize their worth. Lastly, Powers and Moore look at human factors behind selecting LMSs to transform learning environments, finding that, quote, large-scale change within organizations requires a balance of effective communication practices and organizational systems thinking, unquote. Aspects of all three studies are incorporated in the following proposal. As I previously mentioned, this theoretical case study is limited to the more linear steps of an adapted version of Rosenberg's HPT process model. Addressing the iterative aspects of the process would require forming inappropriate assumptions based on conjecture and speculation. Moreover, my firsthand and anecdotal accounts of the time I spent managing an airport provide minimal insight into similar situations across the globe. Most importantly, I took creative liberties when developing certain characteristics of the fictional organization described in this proposal. Some details were changed in the interest of confidentiality, while others were made to better fit the parameters of the assignment. In either case, a real-world application would be far more challenging and time-consuming than this hypothetical case study. Harmonton Municipal Airport, or HRA, is located approximately 5 nautical miles from the fictional city of Harmonton, which owns and operates the airport. The municipality is located in a relatively remote part of the American Midwest and operates on a modest budget. The mission of the airport is to foster the economic development of Harmonton by supporting the aeronautical needs of the local community and its regional patrons in a financially responsible manner. The airport director, who also serves as the airport training manager, reports to an airport advisory board that in turn reports to the city council, which approves or denies all major purchases, budget adjustments, and capital investments. The property consists of approximately 900 acres of municipally owned land upon which sits 2 intersecting runways, supporting structures, and navigational equipment. The airport services 2 commercial flights per day, which connects travelers to 2 major U.S. cities. The airport is staffed with approximately 50 employees, including a federal security detachment, rental car staff, a large group of commercial airline agents, and 13 bona fide city employees, including 2 airport administration staff, 2 custodians and groundskeeping employees, a rotating pair of local law enforcement officers, and 5 airport operations specialists. The latter group also functions as an aircraft rescue and firefighting staff and line technicians for aircraft fueling. Each operations specialist essentially fills 3 positions in one by performing the following tasks: airfield and perimeter checks, runway inspections, friction gradient checks, equipment inspections, facilities management, vehicle maintenance, the issuing of airfield notices, wildlife abatement, ARF duties such as responding to airfield accidents or life-saving measures, aircraft fueling and sales, aviation fuel sampling, and aircraft towing and parking. In regulatory parlance, HRA is considered a Class 1 Part 139 airport, meaning that it is certified to service commercial airliners operating on a set flight schedule. The airport is only permitted to do so, however, by virtue of its Part 139 operating certificate that is issued by the FAA. Unfortunately, the airport is currently in danger of losing its certification because it has established a trend of barely passing or outright failing past FAA periodic inspections. The airport has also seen 5 directors and 4 assistant directors come and go over the past 7 years. The high turnover has undoubtedly contributed to the string of troubling inspections. Over the past few years, FAA certificate inspectors have routinely cited problems and inconsistencies with the airport's Part 139 personnel training program, including incomplete records and inadequate documentation. Airport operations specialists must complete formal in-service training across 27 separate subject areas, including 13 topics related to ARF and another 2 concerning the testing, storage, and distribution of aviation fuel annually. Training evolutions must consist of formal instruction provided by the airport director/training manager, followed by some form of recordable learning assessment. During 4 of the past 5 annual inspections, FAA certificate inspectors have cited the airport for either not having completed all the training or failing to provide the correct training documentation. The FAA promulgates mandated outcomes and publishes a limited amount of reference material. The agency, however, does not provide any curricula or lesson outlines. It therefore falls on the shoulders of airport directors and training managers to research applicable resources, design formal curriculum, create the needed lessons, provide instruction, and assess learning. At HRA, past managers found these tasks overwhelming, especially when forced to juggle training requirements with competing priorities of the airport director's position. A lack of subject matter expertise in the L&D process, a high turnover rate at the director/training manager position, and administrative staffing shortages have contributed to an unsatisfactory learning environment. The current method of delivering instruction is for the airport director to set aside 2 to 3 days per year during which he or she teaches the majority of classes to the airfield operations specialists. A few requirements are outsourced professionals external to the airport, but the airport director ends up delivering 23 lectures over a 72 to 96-hour period. Instructional methods typically include the use of handouts and PowerPoint presentations to supplement lectures and direct instruction. Unsurprisingly, this method of training has proved wildly unsuccessful, with employees complaining about a lack of engagement, outdated or incomplete materials, and difficulty retaining information. Past directors also expressed concerns about being out of their depth or feeling overwhelmed in this environment. The following are some recommended interventions and design proposals that would be used in briefing airport and municipal stakeholders. Although not fully developed here, they would presumably be elaborated upon during a collaborative meeting with airport leadership and policymakers prior to implementation. Organizational development and cultural change. From all outside accounts, it would appear that airport and municipal leaders are either unaware of the severity of the training problems at the airport or do not consider them dire enough to merit serious attention. Despite the high turnover rate of airport directors, airport and city board members have done little to address retention. I recommend a formal collaborative meeting with airport management, the airport board, the city council, and FAA officials to facilitate an earnest discussion about the future of HRA. Emphasis should be placed on retaining qualified management while providing them with adequate training support. Human resources development. Consider either 1, outsourcing staff training to a qualified professional, 2, creating a new full or part-time position exclusively dedicated to managing training, or 3, providing the airport director with formal instruction in the elements of instructional design and human performance technology. Additionally, consider tying salary or benefit incentives, for example, bonuses, paid time off, promotions, to digital badges or micro-credentials that airport operations staff could earn while completing online hybrid courses. Environmental engineering. Purchase and introduce an LMS in the work environment that would facilitate learning and instruction. Online training curriculum courses could be purchased from third-party vendors, or the training manager could design and deliver his or her own material incrementally over the course of a year. Online instruction could be completed asynchronously or combined with practical activities to enhance and demonstrate learning. A learning management system would also facilitate the documentation of training and the furnishing of records to FAA inspectors. Additionally, consider the implementation of support devices such as smartwatches or tablets, which could further facilitate learning. The use of digital badging should also be considered to incentivize skills development. Although this would all come at a significant upfront cost, it would likely prove a wise long-term investment. Human resources management. Establish and maintain open lines of communication between the operations staff, airport director and airport board, city council, and FAA. Solicit feedback, address succession planning, and consider developing new services, partnerships, and revenue streams so the city can increase employees' salaries. All these efforts would likely improve training and retention. In conclusion, it's difficult to guess with any certainty how effective the preceding interventions would prove in practice, but it's reasonable to argue that they would likely improve the overall situation at HRA in some capacity. Promoting cultural development, for example, is a typical means of fostering dynamic and positive changes across many organizations, especially when leveraging the benefits of targeted collaboration and enhanced communications. Two-way communication is also vitally important. Designers and instructors must value and use feedback from their learners, but practitioners must be adequately trained and equipped to provide meaningful instruction. Learning tools and EdTech likewise mean little if not implemented using a clear strategy. Any and all interventions would prove irrelevant, however, if the airport were unable to retain key management and staff. Ultimately, it is the human aspect of the process that binds this proposal, and for that matter, the entire HPT framework together.